My name is Bethany Daniels, and I'm 32 years old. Last Thanksgiving, in front of 19 members of my family, my mom laughed and asked me how it felt to be useless. She had a glass of my sister's good wine in her hand and a brand new bag on her arm, and she made sure the whole table was watching. Here's the thing. 48 hours earlier, I had quietly ended a secret I'd been keeping for 6 years. When my answer came out at that table, my dad shot up so fast his chair screeched, and the question he shouted split my family clean down the middle. My mother's smile died right there between the turkey and the cranberry sauce. That moment wasn't the ending. It was the fuse. Because what my father did next, what my sister found in her own bank records, and what my mother said when she finally ran out of tears, none of them saw any of it coming. Welcome back to Calm Drama Stories, where family secrets come to light and quiet people find their voice. If stories about standing up to the people who take you for granted speak to you, drop a comment below and be sure to subscribe. You won't want to miss what happens at this Thanksgiving table. Let me back up and show you my life the way it looked last fall. I'm a pediatric nurse. Night shift, 9 years, a children's hospital in Dayton, Ohio. I can start an IV on a screaming toddler in a moving crib. I know 16 ways to take a temperature. What I apparently could not do was read my own mother. I lived in a studio apartment on Maple Street with a 2-burner stove and a window that faced a parking lot. Dinner most nights was eggs over rice. Not sad eggs, I'd like to point out. I do a very respectable soy sauce and scallion situation. But eggs, because eggs cost what eggs cost. My scrubs came from the clearance rack. My car had 190,000 miles and a check engine light I greeted like a roommate. And every month, in my banking app, there was a savings folder I'd named the Front Door Fund. It was supposed to be my down payment on a little house someday. 6 years of double shifts should have filled it 3 times over. It stayed shallow, like a bathtub with the drain cracked open. Here's why. On the 1st of every month, at exactly 6 in the morning, money left my account. A big, quiet, automatic bite. I'd scheduled it for that hour on purpose, back when I set it up. 6 a.m. meant I'd be at work, elbow deep in a med pass, too busy to watch it happen. You don't schedule a payment for a time you can't witness unless some part of you already knows you shouldn't be making it. It took me 6 years to hear what that timestamp was telling me. Where was all that money going? That's the part I've never said out loud until now. The money went to my mother. All of it. Her rent, her groceries, her car insurance. The whole quiet architecture of her life ran through my checking account, and nobody in my family knew. It started 6 years ago, 2 years after my parents' divorce. I was 26. She called me over one night, sat me down at her kitchen table, and cried in a way I'd never seen, hands shaking, mascara gone. "Your father left me with nothing," she said. "Nothing, Bethany. I have $11 until Friday." So I loaded a grocery card for her. That was the first domino. A year later, her car insurance lapsed, and I picked it up, because my mother driving uninsured scared me more than the bill did. Then 4 years ago, she found an apartment she loved. A complex called the Berkshire at Willow Bend, the kind of place with a fountain out front. And she couldn't qualify on her own. So I signed as her guarantor, and the rent joined the 6 a.m. bite. $1,250 a month at first. She had one condition, and she gripped my wrist when she said it. "Don't you dare tell your father. Don't you dare shame me in front of this family. This stays between us." I told myself it was dignity. Everyone deserves dignity, and she was my mom. So I ate my eggs, worked my doubles, and kept her secret like a good daughter. 6 years. I kept her secret for 6 years. But that secret had 2 halves, and I was only holding one of them. My dad was holding the other, and neither of us knew the same woman had handed them out. To be fair to me, I'd had 30 years of training. My mother, Lorraine, never gave a gift that didn't come with a receipt she kept in her head. The bike I got at 9 resurfaced in arguments for a decade. After everything, and I bought you that bike. Straight A's weren't mine. They were hers to pass around at church like a casserole. When I made honor roll, she told the ladies in her Bible study before she told me. Favors were loans, kindness accrued interest. When I was little, my grandmother would slip birthday money into my card, and my mom would fold the bills into her own purse on the drive home. For safekeeping, she'd say, and then, catching my face in the rearview mirror, she'd smile and deliver the line I grew up inside of. Love keeps score, sweetheart. It always has. She said it the way other mothers said drive safe. Years later, when the 6 a.m. transfers were bleeding me pale, I offered to sit down with her and build a budget. I'm good at that. I keep a tighter chart on my grocery spending than some hospitals keep on medication. She looked at me like I'd suggested she take up dumpster diving. Budgets are for poor people with small minds, she said, and stirred her coffee. And that was the end of financial planning. I want to be honest with you about something. I didn't think any of this was strange. Fish don't think water is strange. I thought that was simply how mothers talked, how love worked, what daughters were for. It took me 30 years, one beach photo, and a cracked leather notebook to learn where my mother got her arithmetic. We'll get to the notebook. I still think about the notebook. Here's what I was working toward, all those nights. A small house. That's it. That was the whole dream. Nothing with columns. Just a place with a patch of yard for tomatoes, a kitchen where the light came in, and a front door that locked behind a person nobody could bill. I'd gotten pre-approved for a modest mortgage the spring before. My realtor, Janet Kowalski, was a retired teacher with a laugh like a screen door, and she'd been patiently sending me listings for a year. Your price range is a scavenger hunt, she'd say, but I love a scavenger hunt. By my math, 6 years of double shifts should have put the down payment to bed long ago. Instead, I was still thousands short. So I picked up extra weekends and told Janet to keep hunting. Meanwhile, the rest of my family orbited along. My dad, Ray, 63, a retired machinist, lived across town in Huber Heights, in a little ranch house near my sister. He's the kind of man who says maybe 40 words a day but will drive an hour to change your brake pads. My sister Monica, 36, married to Dave, 2 kids, works as an accountant for the school district. She loves hard but runs on fumes. Whenever I hinted that Mom was struggling, Monica would sigh into the phone. Mom's fine, Beth. Mom's been dying dramatically since 2003. Don't let her run you. Easy to say when you weren't the one holding the grocery card. I never corrected her, because correcting her meant explaining, and explaining meant breaking the one rule. So I smiled, swallowed it, and picked up another shift. Then one Tuesday in September, halfway through my shift, my phone lit up against the bedroom window. Mom. And the text under her name said, Emergency. The emergency, when I got to her apartment the next morning, was this. Her car insurance was about to lapse. It wasn't. I paid it. I checked from her parking lot. And a $600 medical bill she waved at me folded, like a fan. I asked to see it. Calmly. The way I'd ask any patient's family for paperwork. And I want you to understand. I had asked before. I'd asked for statements. I'd offered to go to the bank with her. I'd offered twice to sit with her and a free credit counselor from the library. Every request triggered the same 3-act play. Act 1, tears. My own daughter, auditing me. Act 2, shame. You count pennies against your mother? After I gave you life? Act 3, the closer. Ever since her blood pressure scare 2 years ago. One overnight stay for observation, and she walked out with a lifetime membership. She pressed her hand flat against her chest, looked at me with wet eyes and said, Push me on this, and you can explain to everyone why I'm back in that hospital bed. Is that what you want? The one time I'd truly held the line, 3 years back, she went silent on me for 3 weeks and worked the family phones. My Aunt Carol called me sobbing about the daughter who abandons her mother. So no, I didn't see the bill. I transferred the $600 from her hallway, standing on her welcome mat. And as I turned to go, I noticed a stiff paper shopping bag by the closet, cream-colored, tissue paper blooming out of the top, the kind of bag I'd only ever touched at the fancy counters at the mall. My mother slid it behind the coats with her heel, smooth as a dance step. That weekend, I drove out to Huber Heights so my dad could do my brakes. This is how Ray Daniels loves people. He puts your car up on ramps, disappears under it for an hour, and slides out with grease to his elbows and a diagnosis. While he worked, he squinted up at me. You look thin. You sleeping? I work nights, Dad. I sleep in shifts. Like a submarine crew. He grunted, which is his laugh, and then, wiping a caliper with a rag, not even looking at me, he said the sentence that started the earthquake, though neither of us felt it yet. Hard to picture your mother struggling, whatever Carol says. Your mother's set. I made sure of it when we sold the Fernwood house. I stood there in his cold driveway holding a socket wrench I'd forgotten I was holding. Set. He said it the way you'd say a fact about concrete. My mother's version, the one I'd been paying tribute to for 6 years, was $11 until Friday. Your father left me with nothing. 2 people I loved were telling me 2 different stories about the same divorce, and both of them believed themselves. I opened my mouth. I actually felt the question sitting there, round and heavy as a marble. Set how, Dad? What did she get? But I'd sworn. And if I asked, he'd ask why I was asking, and the whole thing I'd been holding for 6 years would come down on a Saturday afternoon between the brake pads and the wheel well. So I swallowed the marble. I'm a nurse. I read charts for a living, numbers that don't lie about people who sometimes do. Daughters read differently. Daughters are trained to close the chart when the news looks bad. 2 weeks later, Janet called me breathless. A little brick 2-bedroom was about to hit the market below asking, estate sale, motivated sellers, gone by Friday kind of deal. If you want a shot, I need you ready with earnest money fast, she said. This is the one that doesn't wait, Beth. I sat at my counter that night after shift, 2 in the morning, and did the math on the back of a pharmacy receipt. I could make it work. Barely. If I skipped 1 month of my mother's rent. 1 single month. Or cracked open my emergency fund and left myself walking a tightrope with no net under a night shift nurse's life. I sat there a long time. My studio was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator thinking. And then the calendar flipped to the 1st, and at 6 in the morning, while I was hanging an antibiotic drip on the ped's floor, the transfer went out like it always did. On time. Obedient. $1,400 plus everything else. Because somewhere along the way I'd decided that her roof mattered more than my door. Nobody made me. That's the ugly, useful truth I can admit now. The bars of my cage were self-installed and I'd polished them. The house sold in 48 hours to a young couple who, Janet reported, cried in the kitchen. I told her congratulations and meant almost all of it. Then I worked 4 nights straight and didn't let myself think, which is a skill you can get scary good at. On the 5th night, a little after midnight, my cousin Dana texted me a screenshot, 3 question marks, and then, wait, isn't this your mom? I opened the picture. Sand, turquoise water, a swim-up bar, and my mother. The screenshot came from my Aunt Carol's photo album, posted for the whole extended family to admire. 6 days in Aruba. I scrolled through it on my break with my back against the supply room shelves. There was my mother in a straw hat, clinking a fishbowl-sized cocktail against Carol's. My mother on a catamaran, scarf streaming, laughing with her whole head thrown back. My mother and Carol in matching cover-ups with their toes in white sand, captioned, "Sister's trip, long overdue." I did the timeline without wanting to. Those 6 days were the exact week, 1 month earlier, when my mother had told me, voice small, so brave, that she'd be away at a church retreat in Indiana? Someplace cheap? Don't worry about me. I remembered that call clearly because I'd offered to cover the retreat fee and she'd said, "You do enough, sweetheart." And I'd hung up feeling guilty that she felt guilty. Standing in that supply room, I ran through every explanation a loyal daughter could grab. Maybe Carol paid? Maybe it was a gift. Maybe the photos were old. But the tissue paper bag was in one of the pictures. Same cream color. Same gold script. Sitting on a hotel bed like a member of the family. Here's the thing about nurses. When a reading doesn't match the symptoms, we don't argue with the machine and we don't argue with our feelings. We take the measurement again, by hand, at the source. Something in me went very quiet and very orderly, the way I get when a monitor starts alarming. I didn't call her. I didn't text Carol. I finished my shift. Meds passed, vitals charted, one scared 7-year-old walked back to sleep. And I drove home through empty streets, sat down at my kitchen counter with my laptop, and started taking my own vitals. Every account, every statement, 6 years deep. The measurements did not improve. I want to be precise about what I did next, because precision was all I had. I did not snoop in my mother's accounts. I couldn't have, and I wouldn't have. I opened mine. My own statements, my own history, my own quiet 6 a.m. bites, going back 6 years. I made coffee at 3 in the morning and built a spreadsheet because apparently when my life catches fire, I respond with columns. 6 years of grocery cards, loaded and reloaded. 5 years of car insurance premiums. 4 years of rent on the Berkshire at Willow Bend, $1,250 a month, and then I noted the date, filed it, didn't yet understand it. A jump to $1,400 about a year back, which she'd explained as a building-wide increase, inflation. Everyone got one. The world is cruel. Add the emergencies, the 600s, the 800s, the furnace repair that may or may not have involved a furnace. When the last cell filled in, I sat back and looked at the total. And the total looked back at me. Just over $100,000. I'm going to let that number sit there, because I had to. $100,000 out of a nurse's take-home, egg by egg, shift by shift, while my front door fund starved and houses sold to couples who cried in kitchens. I didn't feel rage yet. Rage came later, and honestly, it never came the way you'd think. What I felt at that counter was closer to standing at the foot of an X-ray, finally seeing the fracture that explains 6 years of limping. I tore a sticky note off the pad, wrote a question on it, and pressed it onto my refrigerator at eye level. Not the number. I didn't need the number. The question, what did you buy? Because deep down, some part of me was starting to whisper the answer, and the answer wasn't groceries. I decided to give her one clean chance. Not an ambush, an off-ramp. I invited her to coffee at the little place near her complex, the one with the scones she likes, and I rehearsed kindness in the car like a speech. When I sat down, I didn't mention Aruba, or the bag, or the spreadsheet sleeping in my laptop. I said, "Mom, I'm worried about how the money works. Let me help you make a plan. A real one. Budget, maybe a smaller place. I'll go with you to every appointment. You and me." She stirred her latte for a moment. Then she performed a small, wounded laugh for the benefit of the next table. "Carol paid for that trip, you know," she said, though I hadn't brought it up, which told me Dana's screenshot had already made the family rounds. "You'd know that if you ever called your aunt. I was invited. Was I supposed to embarrass the family by saying no?" Move 1. Gaslight. Seamless as silk. Then she set down the spoon and looked at me with something almost like delight. "Oh, I see. You're counting now. Love keeps score. Is that it, Bethany? Is that what we're doing?" Move 2. She took the sentence she'd raised me inside of and handed it back to me as an accusation, and I actually felt the walls of the aquarium for the first time. Then, without missing a beat, move 3. "Christmas is coming. I'll need $800 for gifts, unless you'd like your mother to be the only one with nothing under the tree." And here is where 6 years cracked. I didn't say yes. I didn't reach for my phone to transfer it while she watched, the way I always had. I heard myself say, "Let me think about it." The silence that followed lasted maybe 3 seconds. It told me everything about the price of thinking. It took under 48 hours for the artillery to find my coordinates. First came Aunt Carol, calling at dinner time with her voice already in the key of grief. "Bethany Daniels, after everything your mother has sacrificed," she calls me in tears saying you snapped at her over coffee? Money, Bethany? At Christmas? I noted silently that in this version I had snapped, and that the $800 had become a mood I'd inflicted rather than an invoice I'd received. Then Monica texted, running between a budget meeting and Tyler's soccer practice. "Whatever happened to you and Mom? Can you just call her back? She's spiraling and blowing up my phone and it's parent-teacher week. Please." Not one person asked me a question. That's the design of the machine, I understand now. The phone tree doesn't gather facts, it distributes verdicts. I went to work that night with my jaw aching from clenching it. And then the night shift, as it sometimes does, handed me a mirror. Room 14 was a 6-year-old with pneumonia, finally turning the corner, and his mother had been in the bedside chair for 3 nights straight. She declined the cot every time. Third night, I came in at 2 a.m. to hang fluids, and found her asleep sitting up, one arm through the bed rail, her hand resting on her son's ankle like she was holding a door closed against the dark. She'd never once raised her voice to us. She'd never once told anyone what she was owed. I stood there in the half-light with the pump beeping softly, and I looked at what love actually costs when nobody's keeping the receipt. I pulled the spare blanket off the cot she wouldn't use and tucked it around her shoulders. Then I went out to the hallway and stood very still for a long time, doing arithmetic no spreadsheet can hold. November 1st fell on my day off, and instead of watching the 6 a.m. transfer go out, I'd switched that month to a money order. Small act of control, like straightening the sheets on a bed you can't leave. I drove it over to the Berkshire at Willow Bend myself. The lobby smelled like cinnamon pine cones. Gas fireplace, glossy floors, a player piano tinkling to nobody. Ms. Alvarez, the leasing manager, knows me well. I'm the guarantor on the lease, and the checks have my name on them, so to her, I'm not the daughter, I'm the account. She took the money order with a big smile. Right on time, as always. Oh. And how's everyone loving the upgrade? The 2-bedroom with the den and the garage. That floor plan is my favorite. I kept my face pleasant. Nurse face. The one I use when a reading comes back that can't be right except it is. Remind me when that switch happened? I said, light as anything. She tapped her keyboard. 14 months ago. Went from the 1-bedroom to the Cambridge floor plan. That's where the difference came from. About $150 a month. $150 a month. The building-wide increase. The inflation. The world is cruel. My mother hadn't been keeping her head above water. She'd been adding a den and a garage to the boat and mailing me the fuel bill. I thanked Ms. Alvarez, walked past the fireplace and the piano playing for no one, and stood in the parking lot doing the stillest screaming of my life. My mother wasn't drowning, she was redecorating. I want to pause here, friends, because some of you know this exact feeling. Standing in a nice lobby, learning your sacrifice was somebody's spending money. If that moment has ever found you, tell me in the comments what finally gave it away for you. And subscribe, because what I did next, I did very quietly. I didn't drive straight home from Willow Bend. My hands needed somewhere to steer that wasn't my mother's fountain, so I looped past a listing Janet had texted me that morning with a row of exclamation points. Cedar Lane. And there it was. A little house painted the yellow of a kitchen from an old commercial. 1 story, faded picket fence, gutters that needed love. At the curb stood a mailbox on a wooden post, knocked crooked by some long-ago bumper and never straightened, tilted in a way that looked less like damage and more like a wave. Janet met me there in 20 minutes because Janet is Janet. Inside, creaky oak floors, a kitchen older than me, and afternoon light that fell across the empty dining nook so exactly that I could see a table there, and chairs, and people who came because they wanted to. Nobody had upgraded this house in decades. It didn't apologize. I stood in that light-soaked kitchen with my coat still buttoned and something in my chest unclenched a notch, like the first sip of air after holding your breath through a tunnel. I walked out front, took a picture of the crooked mailbox, and set it as my phone's lock screen right there on the sidewalk. Janet watched me do it and grinned. That's a symptom, she said. I've seen it before. There's no cure. I said, I want this one. Give me until December. She went quiet, doing her own math on my finances, which she knew almost as well as I did. December's tight, Beth. I know, I said, looking at the mailbox. Give me until December anyway. I didn't know yet exactly where the money would come from. I only knew where it would stop going. Before I tell you what I did, I have to tell you about the notebook, because it's the reason I did it the way I did. A week after the leasing office, my mother summoned me to move a dresser. No apology pending, just, I need you Saturday. Wear real shoes. That was normal. My visits had job titles. While we walked the dresser away from the wall, something slid off the back edge and hit the carpet. A small leather notebook, spine cracked, cover soft as an old wallet. It fell open. The handwriting stopped me cold. 2 hands on the same pages. One was slanted and strict. Fountain pen, my grandmother Margaret's, dead now 16 years. The other was rounded and careful. A teenager's, my mother's. 2 columns marched down every page. Ode, school shoes, $4.50. Piano, $2 a lesson. Doctor visit, $6. Winter coat. And across from it, repaid. Ironing, the Hendersons' floors. Silence at the table, Saturday work. Page after page after page. My mother crossed the room faster than I've ever seen her move and pulled it out of my hands. And for 1 second, one unguarded second before the mask reassembled, I watched my 61-year-old mother become a 15-year-old girl standing in front of her own mother, waiting to hear what today had cost. I paid Mother back every penny by my wedding day, she said quietly. Almost proud, almost pleading. It's the only true thing I'm certain she ever told me. Then her chin came up, the room reset, and the voice I knew returned like a key changing back. Love keeps score, sweetheart, it always has. Standing there between the dresser and the wall, I finally saw the whole chain, link by link, running from Margaret's fountain pen through my mother's careful teenage columns straight down to a sticky note on my refrigerator. I felt sorry for her. I still do. But a chain is exactly what it was, and understanding why she collected didn't obligate me to keep paying. Here's what I did not do, and believe me, the options presented themselves nightly. I did not screenshot the Aruba album and forward it to my father with a red circle. I did not stand up at a family dinner with a printed spreadsheet. I did not go one drop of her medicine, the tears, the phone tree, the audience. If I beat my mother at her own game, the game continues. Just under new management. I wanted out of the casino. So I built a door instead of a bomb. At work, I cornered Renata, our unit's social worker, who has spent 20 years helping families figure out care and money without anybody bleeding out, and I asked her a hypothetical that fooled her for 0 seconds. She talked me through it anyway, on our break, over vending machine coffee. What a 61-year-old woman with Social Security on the horizon could actually afford. Which senior apartment communities in the county were decent, safe, and yes, pleasant. 3 of them, with waitlists measured in weeks, not years. How a session with a financial counselor works, and the detail that mattered to me. I could pay the counselor directly. Support without cash. A bridge with guardrails. Renata slid the printouts across the table and used a clinical phrase for what I'd been doing for 6 years, the enabling kind. I stopped her. I don't need a term for it, I said. I needed a spine. Turns out, those are free. She laughed, and then she said, the thing I've repeated to myself 100 times since. You can't budget someone out of a belief, Bethany. You can only stop funding the belief. That night, I bought a craft envelope, the sturdy kind, and filled it. 3 apartment listings, a counselor's card with an appointment already paid for, and a handwritten page of what I was offering instead of money. My Sundays. My help moving. My actual presence. Then I asked my mother to lunch that Saturday. But before Saturday came, I did something I should have done years earlier. I told my sister. Monica sat at my counter after her kids were down, and I opened the laptop and walked her through it. My own statements. Nothing stolen, nothing spied. 6 years of grocery cards. 5 of insurance. 4 of rent. With the mystery jump. Then the upgrade, the den, the garage, the trip. My sister is an accountant. I watched her read the way accountants read, and I watched the color leave her face by rows. Beth, she finally said, very carefully. Mom owes me $3,200. The room tilted. Small loans, she said. A furnace thing, a dental thing, A bridge till the first, then another bridge. Never repaid. Always urgent. And each time, a sigh about how Monica was the only one she could count on. Because your sister never helps me. Bethany has her own little life. You know how she is. I sat there hearing my mother's voice describe a Bethany who never helps, while my 6 a.m. transfers marched through my statements on the screen between us. She'd kept us in separate rooms and told each of us the other one was empty. Monica was ready to burn the whole thing down that night. She wanted the spreadsheet printed, stapled, and read aloud at Thanksgiving like a shareholder report. And this is where she and I split, gently. No, I said. I'm not doing to her what she does to me. No audience, no ambush. I'm just going to stop. Monica stared at me, jaw working, and then she exhaled and squeezed my hand and said, Okay, your call. But I'm done covering for her, and if it comes up at my table, I won't lie. 2 days later, the phone tree delivered its bulletin. Mom would be attending Thanksgiving at Monica's, and she was bringing, quote, an announcement. The shape of the announcement wasn't hard to guess, because Carol previewed it to anyone with a phone. Mom was thinking seriously about moving to Florida, to be near her sister, somewhere warm for her health. And this was the load-bearing sentence. She'll need the kids' help getting set up. Getting set up. I'd heard that phrase before, in my dad's driveway, about a house on Fernwood Street, though I still didn't know what it meant. I was starting to understand that in my family, getting set up was a bill that always found its way to a particular mailbox. Then, the same week, the SUV appeared. I saw it when I dropped off groceries. I'd kept doing the groceries while I built my exit because you don't stop feeding someone the same week you find your spine. The two things aren't related. There it sat in her numbered spot. A brand new SUV, dealer plates still on it, gleaming like a tooth. Leased, I'd learn later. She caught me looking and got out ahead of it, the way she got out ahead of everything. The old car wasn't safe, she said, arms crossed against the cold. Not that my children ever check. If something happened to me on the highway, then you'd all pay attention. I stood there holding her groceries, in my hands, at that exact moment, an actual still life of the whole arrangement, and I felt the last flicker of doubt in me go out, quietly, like a pilot light. She wasn't in trouble. She had never, in 6 years, been in trouble. She had a lifestyle, and the lifestyle had a staff, and the staff was me. The Saturday lunch was set. The envelope sat on my counter like a passenger waiting for a train. And the night before, after shift, I did the thing I do. 2 a.m, kitchen counter, 1 lamp, paper. Left column, the yellow house. Janet needed earnest money in December to hold the deal together. The sellers were patient but not infinite. My emergency fund could cover it, barely, if the 6 a.m. bite stopped. Right column, the bite. Rent, groceries, insurance, Christmas, Florida, whatever came after Florida. Because something always came after. I looked from one column to the other and up at the sticky note on the refrigerator, faded now from months of kitchen sun. What did you buy? And for the first time, I answered it out loud. In my empty studio. In the voice I use for hard news at 3 a.m. I wasn't buying her groceries, I said. I was buying proof I was worth keeping. There it was. 6 years of transfers, and not one of them had been about rent. Rent was the invoice. The product was her approval, sold by the month, price rising annually, satisfaction never included. $100,000 trying to purchase a mother who would look at me the way that woman in room 14 looked at her sleeping son. For free, at 2 a.m., asking nothing. You cannot buy that. It is not for sale anywhere, and the people who'd sell it to you are the ones who never had it in stock. I folded my little 2-column paper in half and slid it under the envelope. The decision wasn't rage, it never was. It was just, finally, correct. Saturday came, and I wore real shoes. I didn't do it at the coffee shop. I did it at her table, because she deserved privacy for this even if she'd never once granted it to me. She made tea, She was in a good mood. The phone tree had reported me docile. I set the craft envelope between us, and I set it the way Renata taught me. No cushions, no apology built into the foundation. Mom, starting December 1st, I won't be paying your rent, your groceries, or your car insurance. Her cup stopped halfway up. I kept going, level as a monitor tone. In that envelope are 3 apartments you can afford on your own, a counselor's card, the first session's already paid, and a page in my handwriting about what I will do. Sundays, moving day, doctor visits. Me, Mom. You get me. You just don't get my paycheck anymore. The silence had texture. I watched her run the usual keys. The eyes went glassy on cue, then dry when they found no audience. The chest hand rose, then thought better of it. What settled on her face instead was something I'd never been allowed to see head-on. Cold, clear calculation. The teenager from the ledger grown up and doing the day's arithmetic. "You'll be nothing to this family," she said finally, each word placed like a coin. "I will make sure of it. By Christmas they won't say your name in my sister's house." I stood, pushed in my chair, and left the envelope where it lay. She didn't so much as glance at it while I was there. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't call after me down the hall. That scared me more than any performance ever had. Tuesday morning, 2 days before Thanksgiving, I sat across from Ms. Alvarez one last time and signed the paper that said my name would come off as guarantor when the lease ended January 31st. I couldn't undo the signature I'd given 4 years ago. If my mother skipped a payment before February, they could still come to me, and I'd set aside money in case, because I don't make threats and I don't leave messes. What I could do was refuse to renew the chain. Ms. Alvarez processed it without one flicker of judgment. I suspect leasing managers see the entire human comedy from behind that desk. Then I drove home to my studio, sat on my bed with my phone, and opened the banking app. There it was, where it had lived for 4 years. Autopay. The first of the month, 6 a.m. My thumb hovered over that toggle longer than it has ever hovered over anything at work, and I've pushed buttons with lives on the other side of them. 6 years, off with one tap. The switch slid from green to gray, and the app, bless it, asked, "Are you sure?" Honey, I have never been more sure of anything with worse timing. Toggle. Done. And from my mother, in all the days since that Saturday at her table, nothing. No call. No text. 9 full days of silence and counting, and if you've ever had a mother like mine, you know silence was never peace. Silence was artillery being moved into position. If you're watching this with your own 6 a.m. autopay, the one you scheduled early so you don't have to see it leave, comment the word toggle below. I'll know exactly what you mean. And stay with me, because Thanksgiving is 2 days out, and you'll want a seat at this table. Inside those 9 quiet days, 2 things happened, one cold and one warm, and I carried them around like stones in opposite pockets. The cold one. Aunt Carol detonated a group text to the whole family. No names, which was the art of it. A long paragraph about children who abandon their mothers right before the holidays, about how a mother's heart only breaks in one direction, about how some people would rather buy houses than honor their family. So my mother had told Carol her version, and my listing had made the rounds too. Monica replied to the group with a single thumbs up on a grocery question and privately texted me. Held the line. You're coming Thursday. Bring your rolls. Ignore the shelling. The warm stone. On Monday, I drove to the title company on my lunch break and wired $3,000 of earnest money, and by Wednesday morning, Janet called, singing. Offer accepted. Closing set for February. The yellow house on Cedar Lane was, pending paperwork and miracles, going to be mine. I drove over after and stood on the sidewalk in the cold for 10 minutes, looking at the crooked mailbox with my phone's lock screen matching it like a promise, and I would not let myself feel it all the way. Joy felt like tempting fire. Then Wednesday evening, the artillery finally spoke, and it spoke in perfume. My phone rang. Mom. Voice bright as tinsel, as if the last conversation at her table had never occurred. See you Thursday, sweetheart. Bring your rolls. Everyone's coming. Everyone. She leaned on the word gently, the way you'd test a floorboard you already knew was loose. My mother never walked into a room she hadn't staged first. Thanksgiving at Monica's is a production with a cast of 19. The good tablecloth, the folding table bolted on at the end for the cousins, the kids' card table in the den. Dave frying the turkey outside in a pot he treats like a race car. Dana and the cousins arguing about the game with the volume respectfully low. My dad in his one nice sweater, parked at the quiet end, sneaking Tyler black olives for his fingers. I brought my rolls, because I always bring my rolls, and I set them down with hands that mostly didn't shake. Mom arrived 40 minutes late, which was standard. Late enough to enter, never so late as to miss the entrance. Camel coat, fresh blowout. The bag, the cream and gold one from the tissue paper afternoon, riding her forearm like a small trophy. She hugged her way down the room person by person and gave me the version with no arms in it. Grace was said, plates were loaded, and then, on schedule, the show began. A sigh, first. Then to Carol, at a volume engineered for the whole table. I manage. Alone. That's what I've learned this year. You learn who your children are when you get old. Carol patted her hand. A cousin's wife made a sympathetic mouth. I ate my green beans. But here's what I noticed that nobody else did. My dad, at the quiet end, had gone still. Fork down. Eyes on his ex-wife, with the particular frown he reserves for an engine that's telling him one thing on the gauge and a different thing entirely through the floor. It was Dana, sweet Dana, who lit the fuse without knowing it, somewhere between seconds and pi. Beth, how's the house hunt going? She called down the table. Any luck? I kept it small. I'd planned to keep the whole day small. Actually, yeah, I said. Found one. It's little, it's yellow, and the mailbox is crooked and I love it. A warm ripple ran around the table. Dave whooped, Dana clapped, my dad's face broke open into the first full smile I'd seen on him in a year, and Monica squeezed my knee under the tablecloth. For about 4 seconds, it was the nicest moment my family had produced in a decade. Then I heard my mother set her fork down on her plate. One precise click of metal on china, and I knew, the way you know a monitor's about to alarm, that the spotlight had wandered and she was going to get it back. She laughed. Loud, bright, aimed. The table hushed around it. A house, she said. You. Bethany, sweetheart, you can barely keep yourself alive in that little room you rent. You bring rolls from a tube and drive a car that sounds like a can opener. She looked around, gathering her audience the way she gathered everything, and then she leaned forward, eyes shining, and dropped it with the tenderness of a guillotine. How does it feel to be useless, daughter? 19 people, one oven timer ticking in the kitchen. Somewhere outside, a neighbor's dog. Nobody breathed. My mother sat back with her wine and smiled at me, warm as a heat lamp, waiting to be handed what she was owed. I want to tell you what I felt in that silence, because it surprised me then, and it surprises me still. Not rage, not tears climbing my throat. What I felt was the quiet of a room where a decision has already been made, where the surgery already happened and this is just the bandage coming off. I set my napkin beside my plate. I looked at my mother, really looked, at the blowout and the bag and the shine in her eyes that I had personally financed, and I heard my own voice come out level and almost kind. Feels great, I said. Since I just stopped paying your rent? The words landed in the middle of the table like something dropped from a height. My mother's smile didn't fall. It froze, stuck to her face a half-second past its expiration, which is somehow so much worse, and then it slid off all at once, leaving nothing behind it but arithmetic. Down the table I heard it before I saw it. The scrape of my father's chair legs catching the floor as he stood straight up, 63 years old, napkin still tucked in his collar, his voice filling the dining room the way I hadn't heard since I was a kid. Rent! What rent? And the table detonated into stillness. That impossible thing where 17 other people all stop existing at once. Monica was already moving, God bless her, herding the kids toward the den with promises of a movie and pie at the card table. Dave killed the TV on his way back in. Carol's hand crept to her collarbone. My mother looked from me to my father, and I watched her do something I'd never once seen her do at a family gathering. She hesitated. "Bethany pays my rent," my mother said finally, choosing the tone of a woman explaining something tedious to staff. "Children help their mothers, Raymond. Not that you'd understand family." "How long?" my father said. It wasn't a question the second time either. "How long, Bethany?" So I told him. No spreadsheet, no phone, no raised voice, just the facts, laid out plain like instruments on a tray. 6 years, Dad. Groceries, then her car insurance, then rent. The last 4 years. I signed as her guarantor at Willow Bend. Last year the rent went up because she moved to a bigger unit. 2 bedrooms, a den, a garage. And in September she spent 6 days in Aruba while I covered everything and told me she was at a church retreat in Indiana. Each sentence hit my father somewhere I couldn't see. He gripped the chair back until the wood complained, and then he turned to my mother and his voice came out low and cracked and terrible. "Lorraine, I gave you $180,000, every cent from the Fernwood house. I kept the pension, you took the house money, so you would never have to worry. So our girls would never have to carry you." He looked around the table, at a room full of family, learning 2 secrets at once, then back at her. "Where did it go?" For a moment my mother sat perfectly still. Then the machine picked its lever, and the tears arrived. Right on time, glistening for the cheap seats. "You would throw money in my face? At Thanksgiving?" "I am your mother," she said, wheeling on me. "I gave you life. You owe me? Everything was going to be fine. The Florida move would have fixed all of it if you weren't so selfish." And there it was. The announcement, dead on arrival, in its true shape, an invoice. What happened next is the part I'd rehearsed for without knowing it, my whole life. My mother stood. She pressed both hands flat on Monica's good tablecloth, and she summoned the full house voice, the one that filled churches and cowed pharmacists, and she played the last card in the deck. "Fine. You want to count pennies against your mother? Then choose, Bethany. You walk out that door, you are no daughter of mine. Not at Christmas, not at my funeral, not ever. Choose." The room held its breath for me, and I looked at her. I made myself look, and here is what I finally saw. Not the mother I'd been paying for, 6 years, a monthly installment on a woman who might someday look back at me the way that mother in room 14 looked at her son. That mother was never going to be delivered. She didn't exist. There was only this one, 61 years old, magnificent, terrified, standing on a tablecloth battlefield she'd chosen herself, offering me one last chance to buy her. I stood up too. Not fast. I pushed my chair in behind me, because Monica's floors are nice. "The counselor's appointment is paid for," I said, and my voice stayed level, and hers never would again. "The apartment list is on your table. That offer doesn't expire, Mom. You can have my Sundays. You can't have my paycheck." I picked up my coat off the hook by the door. Behind me her voice climbed, cracked, went shrill in a way I'd never heard in public. "Love keeps score, Bethany, it always has." I stopped in the doorway, and I gave her back the family arithmetic, one last time, gently, the way you close a chart. "Then I'm paid in full." I didn't slam the door. I pulled it shut with a click, soft as a decimal point, and the cold air took me. I made it as far as the porch steps. My breath came out in clouds and my keys were somewhere in my coat, and my hands had opinions of their own, and behind me the storm door creaked, and it was my father. He came down one step, then stood beside me at the rail, staring out at the frozen lawn like it owed him something. My dad has maybe 40 words a day in him, and he'd spent half the ration shouting. So what he said slow. "I made sure your mother was set. Prided myself on it. All these years I never once checked who was setting you." His jaw worked. 6 years of it, Bethy, on a nurse's pay. And I was down the road the whole time, thinking my girls were fine. He put his hand on my shoulder, heavy as a toolbox, and left it there, and that was the whole speech. And it was enough. Then the door again. Monica, no coat, arms crossed against the cold, holding a plate wrapped in foil. "You're not driving home hungry, that's not a thing that's happening," she said, stuffing it into my hands. "And Sunday, my kids are helping you pack the studio. Emma already called dibs on the tape gun." Through the bright window behind her, I could see the table I'd left. Carol with her arm around my mother talking, hands sketching the air, already, I knew with total certainty, renovating the story into a version where she was the casualty. The audience was smaller now. She'd manage. I hugged my sister, hugged my father, got in my loud little car, and did not drive home. I drove across town, cut the engine on Cedar Lane, and sat in the dark looking at a crooked mailbox in my headlights. Then my phone lit up. "Mom. Voicemail. 41 seconds. I sat in the car with my thumb over the play button for a long moment, the way you pause before pulling back a dressing. Then I played it. Once. All the way through. 41 seconds. And she made every one of them count. I'll give her this. My mother was never an amateur. It opened in fury. I had humiliated her in front of her family on a holy day after everything. Around the 15-second mark, it downshifted into grief. She was old. She was alone. She never thought a child of hers could be so cold. Then, briefly, unbearably, it went sweet. "You were my little shadow, you know. My helper. My good girl." And if she'd stopped there, I might have cried in that dark car. She didn't stop there. It closed with the toll booth. "If you don't fix what you've done by Sunday, don't ever call me again." Fury, grief, sugar, threat. All the levers, pulled in order. One last full performance of the only song she knew. I listened, and where that voicemail used to land in me, something had healed over. Scar tissue, maybe, or just a paid-off receipt. I didn't call back. I typed one text instead. The counselor's name, the date and time of the session that was already paid for, and one more line. "The offer stands. B. Send." Then I turned my phone face down on the passenger seat and looked at the little yellow house, dark and patient behind its crooked mailbox. For 6 years I'd paid, every month, to feel like I was worth keeping. That night, parked outside a house that didn't even know me yet, for free, for nothing, I felt like I was already home. December 1st came, and for the first time in 4 years, 6 a.m. arrived and took nothing from me. I worked that morning. I hung an IV at 5:58 and one at 6:15, and somewhere in between, nothing happened, and nothing has ever felt so much like something. Here's what December actually proved, though. The rent at Willow Bend got paid. On time, in full. January 2. Ms. Alvarez never called me once. My mother, who could not survive without me, wrote those checks herself from money that, it turns out, had been there all along. The money was never missing. Only the excuse was, when the lease ended January 31st, she didn't renew. She moved into a one-bedroom at a senior community across town. One of the 3 places I noticed from a certain craft envelope, though she'd sooner die than say so. Carol drove up and helped her move, and within a month, the story had its official edit. She'd chosen to simplify, because possessions are a prison, a philosophy she debuted at church to warm reviews. The SUV went back when its lease allowed. She kept the bag. She attended exactly 1 session with the counselor I'd paid, declared the woman dim and disrespectful, and never returned. My mother did not transform. People mostly don't. She adapted. A magnificent, unbeatable adapter. And the family ledger she carries stayed open. Just not on my page. Never again on my page. I closed on the yellow house the 3rd week of February, in a title office with bad coffee and a pen chained to the desk, which struck me as funny. After everything, they thought somebody might steal the pen. The keys weighed nothing and everything. My dad showed up the first Saturday without being asked, toolbox in the truck bed, and rebuilt the rotten porch steps in an afternoon. He hardly said a full sentence the whole day, and every board was love, measured twice. He stayed for dinner. I made him eggs over rice, and he ate 2 plates of the fanciest dinner I have ever served anyone. Sunday, Monica's kids came with the tape gun. Emma and Tyler found the paint shelf in the garage and begged to redo the mailbox, and when I came out with lemonade, they'd painted it fresh, but left it crooked, on purpose, dead serious about it. "It looks like it's waving," Emma explained. "It stays crooked forever." In April, a birthday card came in that mailbox, in handwriting I'd know anywhere. "Thinking of you, Mother." No apology, no invoice. I stood at the curb a while, then put it on the windowsill, where it still sits. A crack in a wall isn't a door, but twice a month, Sundays, I still drive her to the grocery store. She talks. I drive. Sundays were the offer, and I keep my word. She has my Sundays. My paycheck never met her again. This Thanksgiving, the second one, happened at the Yellow House. My table isn't big enough, so Dave brought the folding one and it didn't match, and nobody cared. Dad carved. Monica brought 3 pies for 11 people. Dana came with the cousins who still speak to me, which is most of them, as it turns out. Audiences drift when the show never changes. On my refrigerator, where a sticky note used to ask what I'd bought, there's a sign Emma made with markers, crooked as the mailbox. House rules in 8-year-old capitals. No one owes anyone. Everyone brings a dish. We set a chair that stayed empty. The invitation went through Carol and came back declined, which is its own kind of answer, and the table was warm anyway. Standing at the stove, watching my family eat food nobody would be billed for, I finally understood what 6 years of transfers could never buy me. Real love doesn't keep score. It just keeps showing up, and the day I stopped paying to be loved was the day I found out exactly who had loved me for free all along. That's my story. 6 years of rent, 1 question at a Thanksgiving table, and a crooked mailbox with my name on it. If this reminded you that you can love your family without funding them, take it as your sign. Set 1 boundary this week, and keep it kindly. Share this video with someone who's still paying to be loved, then drop a comment, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.